Good afternoon, everyone. Today is February the 2nd, 2022, and welcome to the Ways and Means Bill hearings for this afternoon. We will start with Vice Chair Crosby on House Bill 288, and there are two witnesses, including the Vice Chair. So whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, Vice Chair, distinguished members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Brian Crosby, and it is my honor to present House Bill 288, infant car seats, baby bottles, baby bottle nipples, tax exemption. This bill exempts car seats, bottles, and nipples from the Maryland sales and use tax and reduces the burden on working families. Families typically buy 8 to 10 baby bottles a year and replacing the bottle nipples every 3 months. And the average car seat is around $250. For one child alone, these items can cost up to about $500 a year for a family. Similar legislation is passed in other states. Connecticut and Florida have exempted car seats. Minnesota exempts baby bottles and nipples. And Maryland already exempts products like nursing equipment, baby powder, and formula. For families living paycheck to paycheck, this exemption could be a gigantic difference maker. Working along with Delegate Dana Jones, we are trying to just put together a package of bills that make things a little bit easier for working families, given the current climate with inflation continually rising. For these reasons, I ask the committee for a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next, Sara Price for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sara Price. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association, here in support of this bill. We would like to thank the sponsors for bringing it forward. Making it easier for families to purchase these necessary items for their households, for their children, will make a really big difference for a lot of families in Maryland. That's about it. We think it's a good bill. We like it. We think that it'll have a really positive impact on Maryland's households, and we would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor or the witness? Seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 288. Thank you. House Bill 364, Delegate Henson, and there are 3 witnesses. So whenever you're ready, Delegate, you can begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for allowing me to present HB 364, Sales and Use Tax Medical Devices Exemption. This bill exempts certain durable medical equipment from Maryland sales and use tax, specifically thermometers, pulse oximeters, and blood pressure monitors. This bill puts these valuable medical devices in the tax exempt category, along with other medicines, medical devices, and hygiene aids. The importance of access to thermometers, pulse oximeters, and blood pressure monitors has only increased with shifts towards expanding the use of telemedicine. Expanding these devices from, or exempting, pardon me, these devices from sales tax does have a fiscal impact on state revenue, but it has a far greater impact on delivering healthcare to Marylanders across the state, particularly those living on fixed incomes, those with medical vulnerabilities, those disconnected from urban healthcare centers. I know that it is our shared goal to diminish these obstacles and to deliver healthcare in all ways possible, and this bill is a small part of fulfilling that duty. Thank you for your consideration, and I hope your support on House Bill 364.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Cindy Carter for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and committee. I'm Cindy Carter. I'm the co-founder of the Critical Medical Needs Program, founder of Power to the People Program, and executive director of Cancer Support Foundation. I'm here today to speak in support of House Bill 364. Over 17 years, I've helped over 16,000 clients, the most vulnerable that have cancer and all types of medical challenges, try to meet their everyday expenses, and as well as being able to keep their power on. I'm a 4-time caregiver and very aware of the costs that mount up when you're taking care of somebody who has a medical challenge, between the supplies, the medicine, the special foods, the supplement, all the different equipment. Having a sales tax exemption would give some relief to these families. I'm asking for a favorable report on House Bill 364, and I'm hoping this starts a conversation on other things that can be done to help the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sara Price for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. Again, my name is Sara Price, here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in support of this bill. As the previous speakers have noted, this bill would have a positive impact on healthcare in Maryland, particularly given the current overload of our healthcare system and the prohibitive cost of getting a lot of healthcare. Making these particular items more accessible for Marylanders in need would have a positive impact on their ability to address their health issues, to have positive telehealth interactions, and just to generally maintain their own health. We think it's a good bill. We urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Delegate Lucky has a question.
Sorry, I had a little trouble with my mute button there. Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the sponsor, obviously, I think this is a great bill and a great effort. In talking a little bit with the Comptroller's office about some of the taxation of medical goods like these, the conversation came up that while the Comptroller has interpreted the law in a way to allow N95 and KN95 masks to be exempt from taxation, it might be better for us as a state to confirm that through legislation. Would you be comfortable if we were to move forward with this bill with adding N95, KN95 masks into the exemption?
Thank you for the question, Delegate. Yes, I would consider that friendly.
Are there any other questions for the bill sponsor or the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 364. Moving to House Bill 321, Mr. Majority Leader, and you have 3 witnesses, so whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the new members of the committee, welcome to the wonderful world of corporate income tax apportionment law. You may recall a few years ago, Maryland changed how we calculate apportionment for the purposes of corporate income tax. And we had moved to a system which is becoming increasingly popular across the country of using what's called a single sales factor, essentially basing our corporate income tax on sales within the state, or rather the apportionment of our corporate income tax on sales within the state. When we enact major changes to our corporate income tax, there's an unintended consequence that really, as I recall, we didn't discuss at the time, but that impacts publicly traded companies. Because of the accounting principles, generally accepted accounting principles that they use, essentially what happens is that the company is hit twice. They're hit with increased tax liability, right? If they, for example, are on the wrong side of the switch to a single sales factor. But in addition to that, they're hit long-term with issues with how they report their long-term profits and their accounting for the publicly traded corporation. So essentially what this bill does is it gives companies that have had that unintended impact on their financial statements what's called deferred tax relief. So it creates a deduction which won't be in effect for many years. Actually, I think in the bill it's 2031. But allows them to offset the negative financial statement impact. And that time can be changed, right? In the future, the state could determine that, we're not in a position to actually grant the deduction, so we can move it forward in the future. This is not new practice. We adopted something similar into the language of the combined reporting bill that passed the House, but not the Senate a couple years ago. It's been used in other states like New Jersey and New Mexico. And that's the bottom line with the bill. It's just a little bit of help for companies that were negatively impacted on their financial statements by our transition to single sales factor. And with that, I'll turn it over to the witnesses.
Thank you. So all the witnesses will have 2 minutes, beginning with Rob Gargiola.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I also want to thank the Majority Leader for sponsoring this legislation. He honestly did a very good job summarizing what the bill does As was said, this will not have any financial impact on the state of Maryland for at least a decade and potentially longer. It's something that this committee voted in favor of on other tax policy just 2 years ago, overwhelmingly, and I believe the House overwhelmingly passed as well. And as he mentioned, many states have done this. Blue states like Massachusetts and New Jersey, and red states like Texas and Kentucky. So it's something that is not new. It's a practice that's done. That being said, it can have a significant impact due to gap and financial reporting that companies need to do. And but let me just state, I forgot to say who I was, Rob Gargiola with Compass Advocacy on behalf of NextEra Energy Resources. Apologies for that. I should have stated that at the very beginning. It just dawned on me. I also have Angela Patel, who's with me. She's a CPA with NextEra, and she can answer any technical questions. But the bottom line is this can affect their capitalization. It can affect long-term investment. They're one of the largest renewable energy developers in the world, and they've made some investments in Maryland. Would like to make more investments in Maryland. And again, this is not something that's going to affect state tax revenues for at least a decade, as the majority leader said. So with that, I would urge the committee respectfully to favorably report this legislation. And if you have any questions, Angela Patel with NextEra can address any technical aspects you might have as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sara Price for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Again, Sara Price here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in support of this bill. We appreciate the sponsor's attention to this issue. I don't want to be too repetitive to you. I'll be very brief. This would simply help to rectify the negative impacts that were caused by the transition to single sales factor apportionment, and it would address the effect on stock prices and value for these corporations that are publicly traded and that were, came out as the losers in the winners and losers that we predicted for single sales factor. We would urge a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Angela Patel, please, for 2 minutes.
I don't need 2 minutes. I'm simply here to answer any technical questions that you may have. Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair and committee members, that Rob stated our position on our behalf, and I'm happy to answer any technical questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor or the witnesses? Okay, seeing no, I see Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to clarify, this is, pushing the potential expense to the state out for quite some period of time, and with recognition that it could be extended further, right? And so I guess my question really is to Mr. Gargiola, or perhaps what future objections might you have, or are you willing to say you would not have to further extensions?
Well, it's hard to look out. I was just going to say it's hard to look out, 10 years.
Right.
But what I can say is that other states that have adopted similar policies on a range of corporate tax related issues, including single sales factor, combined reporting, and other issues, they've actually revisited the issue and have extended the date. So again, it's hard to predict what the legislature might do 10 years from now, but I would surmise, depending on what the fiscal impact would be then, you'll make prudent decisions at that point in time.
Will it continue to serve its same purpose to you from an accounting standpoint if it's continually extended?
I'll defer to Angela on that as the tax expert, but I believe the answer is yes, but I'll defer to her on that.
Thanks.
Yes, Delegate Feldmark, thank you for the question. And it would serve the same purpose to us if it were extended. In other states where it has been extended, there has been really no pushback from the business community. The only pushback was when Massachusetts did 1 year threaten to repeal it, and there was some pushback then, but with regard to pushing out the dates, it serves the same purpose, and there has not been any significant pushback from the business community in other states that have done that.
Thank you.
Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure which witness this question is best addressed to. There's been some talk of what Massachusetts has done. Could we get a full list of the states that have enacted this particular deduction? There's another piece of written testimony for this bill that says that no other state has enacted this particular deduction. I'm just looking for some clarity on that.
If I may, there's a document, STRI. It's a rather lengthy document. I think it's like 20 some pages. But on page 14, it does have an illustration. And I think this document is about a year old. But on page 14, it does illustrate a little more than, I don't know, 8 or 9 states that have done this. I believe other states, in addition to what's on this list, have also done a similar policy. But there's a list on that document for you for your reference.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 321. Moving on to House Bill 282, Delegate Jones, and you have 3 witnesses. So whenever you're ready, you can begin.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Chairwoman Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and fellow members of the Ways and Means Committee, I am Delegate Dana Jones for the record. Last year, I came before you to testify on an issue that is very near and dear to my heart, and that's diaper need. The lacking of sufficient diapers to keep infants dry, comfortable, and healthy. It's an issue experienced by 1 in 3 families here in the United States. I'm thrilled that that law from last year is providing some relief to diaper banks through charity of others. Throughout this pandemic, I personally saw the severity of this need firsthand through my experiences working weekly with diaper distribution lines in my district and around our state. Diapers and other hygiene products were always the first to run out, with food banks and diaper pantries struggling to have supply to keep up with the demand. HB 282 before us today would eliminate state sales tax for diapers. Families with 1 young child spends over $1,200 a year on diapers. With that number expected to increase due to recent inflation and supply chain issues, there is no national or statewide welfare program that can be used to purchase diapers or other essential hygiene products for babies and toddlers. Removing the sales tax on these essential items would save Maryland families well over $12 million annually. With our state and nation continuing to grapple with the aftershocks of the pandemic, rising inflation, labor shortages, the question is, how can we help relieve the pressure that Maryland families are feeling? I really feel that this bill helps with that. Most childcare facilities require parents to provide diapers for their child when dropping them off. Nationally, 57% of parents experiencing diaper need who rely on childcare say they missed an average of at least 4 days of school or work in the past month just because they don't have any diapers to drop off with their child. A study conducted by the Connecticut Center for Economic Analysis found that the incident of diaper rash decreased by 1/3 after families began receiving clean diapers from diaper banks. Given the extensive need for the importance of these items, it is absolutely essential that we take action to help relieve the cost for families and diaper banks. Our state policies are a reflection of our values. I believe it's time for our state to take the step for all Maryland families. I want to thank all of the advocates who my office has been working with again this year on this critical legislation, and I'm so proud to be working with Delegate Brian Crosby on it. I respectfully urge a favorable report for this bipartisan bill to help Maryland children get access to the supplies they need. And thank you for allowing my panel as well.
Thank you. And the rest of the witnesses will have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Philip Vanderklay.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Atterbury, and all members of the Ways and Means Committee for the opportunity to testify today in support of HB 282. My name is Philip Vanderklay, and I'm the Director of Policy and Government Relations for the National Diaper Bank Network. We represent a network of over 250 nonprofit diaper banks across all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. including four that serve Maryland. And I'm excited that one of our awesome members is here today to testify as well. I would really like to thank Delegate Jones for her committed leadership to supporting Maryland's families and accessing the diapers they need to keep their children clean, dry, and healthy. As Delegate Jones described, diaper need is a prevalent and often overlooked public health issue. During the pandemics, many diaper banks saw demand for their services increase by 200% and up to even 600%. In response, they worked really hard to increase their distribution and did so by an average of 86% across the country. Unfortunately, without a dedicated federal funding stream supporting our diaper banks and only 6 states providing funding, there's still substantial unmet need that has not abated. By exempting diapers from the sales tax, HB 282 would provide critical tax reform for families. Parents working hard to make ends meet stretch each dollar as far as they can, and savings from the sales tax exemption can enable them to buy larger quantities at better prices. Over the course of the year, this could mean an additional month's supply of diapers, which is so important for families. Due to the impact of diaper need on families' finances that Delegate Jones referenced, the same research shows that every dollar invested in diaper distribution yields an $11 return thanks to those improved work and education outcomes. Currently, 10 states exempt diapers from sales taxes, with Louisiana and California being the most recent. I respectfully ask today that you support this important legislation and put Maryland on track to become the 11th state to support children and families in this important way. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next, Sara Price for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Sara Price here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in support of this legislation. Diapers are a non-negotiable item for families with small children. If you have an infant, a small child, you can't not have diapers. And as has been stated, the cost of diapers is very high, is continuing to go up, and it's having a major impact on these households and on families who are strapped for cash and really have to count every single nickel and dime. So we believe that this bill would have a very positive impact on Maryland's households and Maryland's children, and we would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Shelley Tucker, please.
Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the House of the Ways and Means Committee, thank you for the opportunity to submit the Maryland Diaper Bank's testimony in support of House Bill 282. I am Shelley Tucker, founder of Maryland Diaper Bank, a nonprofit that provides diapers and basic diapering essentials to stimulate health, growth, and good hygiene in Maryland babies. I'm going to start my testimony with the first most important cliff note that every baby deserves a clean bottom, regardless of their financial needs. I'm going to share a brief overview of our 3 years servicing Maryland families. In 2018, we established the Maryland Diaper Bank, where the Maryland's population for children under 3 was nearly 220,000, and 8% of those families were earning less than 100% of the federal poverty level. And this was the community need that ignited our mission. In 2019, we faced the 35-day federal government shutdown, and it was there that 20% of Maryland's workforce was impacted. And we provided diapers for those families directly. By the close of 2019, 12% of Maryland's children under 18 lived in poverty. And then there was 2020, with the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the economic challenges already faced by Maryland families. And according to this January 2020 Census Impact Report, nearly 200,000 Maryland households earn less than the national poverty level. Of this population, 171,000 families were led by single heads of household, and nearly 120,000 of those households were led by women. Given the time of the unique economic challenges faced by Marylanders, the need for support is at an all-time high. Sales tax relief on diapers will alleviate the compounding effects on the layered tax of mothers, women, and babies. Through these turbulent times, we remain committed to our mission to support Maryland families, and we appreciate your affirmative vote on HB 282. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, are there any questions? I see Delegate Hartman has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill forward. A question, if diapers are excluded, would it include adult diapers? And if not, if they're coded differently or whatever in the tax code or whatever, could it be amended to help our seniors and include adult diapers? I think a lot of them are in the same situation.
Well, thank you so much for that question. And actually, they are already exempt under the Maryland tax code. So we are really just leaving children behind to be the last ones. If you don't mind, they are in fact already exempt. So they include adult diapers and all of the supplies needed, including incontinent pants. So they're already.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Delegate.
Are there any other questions? Delegate Jones, I appreciate your bill. There was a period of time where I had 1 in pull-ups and 2 in diapers, all at the same time. So
thank you.
Good times.
Good times.
That concludes the testimony on House Bill 282. Moving to Delegate Wilkins, House Bill 351. And there are 4 individuals signed up to testify in addition to you. Those individuals will have 2 minutes. So whenever you're ready, Delegate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I am State Delegate Janelle Wilkins, and I'm pleased to present HB 351, a bill related to tax equity for our medical cannabis businesses. If you have been on this committee, you are aware of this bill and several times that we've introduced it. And if you are new to the committee, I am looking forward to introducing you to this bill. I think this bill is particularly important this year as we potentially embark upon expanding and fully legalizing cannabis in Maryland. And I hope that this is the year for us to ensure the success of these businesses and the success of this industry by implementing equity in taxes. Medical cannabis, as you know, is a growing and very important business in the Maryland economy. Medical cannabis sales have increased from $96 million in revenue in 2018 to $565 million in 2021. During the pandemic, we really saw how medical cannabis businesses were absolutely essential to providing much needed medicine to Marylanders in need. They, like so many other businesses, were quick to pivot in order to continue providing services to Marylanders in a safe manner. Unfortunately, though, the current tax structure puts this industry at a severe disadvantage when it comes to being able to claim necessary business expenses that every other business is able to claim. As you know, normally a business can deduct their necessary and ordinary expenses from their taxes. So whether it is cost of security, cost of various goods that the business needs in order to exist, they're usually able to deduct those expenses. However, because medical cannabis is considered illegal at the federal level, we are tied to that in Maryland. And as a result, our medical cannabis businesses are not able to deduct their ordinary business expenses from their taxes. And so what this bill does is that it ensures that for state taxes, that our medical cannabis businesses are able to deduct those really important and critical business expenses from the state taxes. So while this bill applies to growers, to processors, and to dispensaries, it's especially critical for the dispensaries because they do have the least flexibility with their taxes and virtually no ability to write off any of these expenses. This bill does not create a tax credit or provide special treatment for the cannabis industry. Rather, it would create parity, treating the medical cannabis licensees like every other business in the state. And so I really want to underscore in closing how critical it is that we create this parity, that we allow our legal medical cannabis industry to have parity in terms of being able to deduct those critical expenses. So I urge a favorable report for HB 351. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Wilkins, and committee. I want you to know that our colleagues from HGO have joined us. Delegates Kaiser, Chisholm, and Robin Lewis. So welcome. They are here on the Zoom with us. And so next I will call Venus Hemanshadra. Hopefully I pronounced that okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Veena Semachandra, and I am one of the owners at Herbiculture, and we are very much in favor of HB 351. Herbiculture is one of the very few women and minority-owned medical cannabis dispensaries in the state, and we're located in District 14 in Burtonsville. I just want to take a moment to thank Delegate Wilkins for introducing this bill, and for the rest of the committee for taking this bill into consideration, because this bill is something that we desperately need for our industry. As a small business operator, we go through the same struggles as any other small business in the state of Maryland, and more, with 280E being one of the biggest struggles that contribute to that. And so, with us, again, being a retailer, we get affected by these laws the most because most of our operations relate to the sale of medical cannabis products, so that we are unable to deduct the most basic of expenses like salaries and rent when we're filing taxes. Like I said, we are a state legal business, and 280E taxes us so unfairly to a point where we pay 6 times more in state taxes compared to any other small business that does not have to follow 280E laws. In fact, over the, because of the very large tax bill, we've been operating at a net loss, even though we've been operational for almost 4 years, and we paid close to $50,000 in state taxes alone last year. We just want the opportunity to be successful, just like any other small business in the state. And really, because of laws like these, it really affects folks like us, where, companies from other states come in and take over our businesses and really diminish the representation we have as minorities and women in the industry. So again, I just ask that we get treated just like any other business. And again, thank you for giving me the time to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ashley Bagwell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Ashley Bagwell, here this afternoon on behalf of the Maryland Medical Dispensary Association in strong support of House Bill 351. I'd like to thank Delegate Wilkins for introducing this legislation. It is important for the entire industry, but as was previously said, it's particularly important for dispensaries in the state, and in particular, small independent dispensaries. I'd like to make just 2 quick points. We fully understand that this bill does not provide a complete solution and a complete fix to the 280E problem. In order for that to happen, the federal government has to act. But at least a partial solution like the one offered in House Bill 351 goes a long way to helping medical cannabis licensees, especially the dispensaries like the ones that you'll hear from today. Second, and Delegate Wilkins touched on this in her opening remarks, but I think it bears repeating, this bill does not create any kind of special tax treatment for medical cannabis licensees in the state. Rather, it levels the playing field, treating them like every other business in the rest of the state. I will just briefly note that I think 36 states in the District of Columbia do have legal medical cannabis programs, and almost a third of those states have done something similar to what Delegate Wilkins is proposing in House Bill 351. And so with that, I will thank you for your time. I urge a favorable vote, and I'm happy to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Warren Lemley, please.
Hello, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I appreciate you taking the time to hear me today. I speak on behalf as the Chair of the Legislative Policy Committee of the Dispensary Association, President and owner of Peak Relief of District 17 in Rockville, and honestly, just as a member of many different business associations here in Maryland. I've spoke with a lot of legislators and people and the other business leaders in the state, and it's pretty much resoundingly come across that, everyone thinks that this should be something that gets passed, that this is something that every business in the state of Maryland should be taxed the same. And I think that, especially with the previous testimony, I just really like to emphasize the fact that, we are currently seeing a lot of conglomeration in our industry right now. We have a lot of independent dispensaries that are really trying to hold on. And a lot of times that tax bill at the end of the year is something that a lot of the independent dispensaries have not prepared for, and is honestly one of the catalysts that lead to, basically the multi-state operators and out-of-state interests coming in and taking over these licensees before they basically fail. So I'm here just really kind of pleading with everybody in the committee here today to just please allow our businesses to fairly deduct their taxes like other businesses in Maryland. This is something that I think that is important to get done now. I think that we've waited and kind of pushed it back for a couple of years now, and I really hope and believe that we can get a favorable and report on this bill and hopefully get it through this year. I appreciate you all taking the time, and I appreciate any questions that you may ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor or any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing no questions, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 351. Thank you. Next, House Bill 252, Delegate Blackvich Carr. And I would like the committee to know that we have two members of the Comptroller's Office here to answer any questions when, should you have any, after the testimony, Daniel Roan and Krista Sermon. So Delegate Blackvich Carr, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, colleagues, Delegate Julie Blackvich Carr here to present House Bill 252. This is legislation to ensure that low-income Marylanders who are eligible right now for the Earned Income Tax Credit are actually receiving that credit. And I know that members of the committee are very familiar with this tax credit. The Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC, is a very effective anti-poverty program that is highly targeted to helping low-income working Marylanders and their families to get out of poverty. And of course, just last session, we both increased the dollar value of the credit for certain people, as well as expanded the eligibility for the tax credit. And I'm really glad that we took those steps and acted as the legislature last year on both of those issues. However, there's a little bit of an issue right now in Maryland and nationally with the EITC, which is that a sizable number of people who are actually eligible for the program don't claim the credit. And in fact, here in Maryland, 1 in 4 eligible Marylanders don't currently receive the EITC credit. And I should say that that number predates the expansion that we did last year. So those are folks who are eligible for the federal credit are not receiving it, 1 in 4. We actually perform worse than the national average on that front. And that is a number that has been getting worse in recent years. So when I heard all of this, I was very concerned and spent a decent amount of time looking into, okay, well, what could we be doing to make sure that folks who are eligible for this credit actually receive it? And the good news is that a number of other jurisdictions, as well as academic researchers, have looked at this specific question to evaluate potential solutions. And actually, there have been programs put into place in other jurisdictions that can serve as a good model for Maryland. Let me talk a little bit about the academic research, because I think for probably most of us, we might assume that increased communications would really be a good way forward, that this might be due to people not knowing about the EITC, not knowing that they're eligible for it, not knowing what a valuable credit that it is. However, the academic studies, and there have been numerous studies that have looked at that particular question, that particular issue, don't find that it's lack of information that's the barrier. When people actually are provided with more information about the EITC, it does not increase the uptake in terms of people actually applying for it. Instead, there are much more structural barriers as to why people don't receive the EITC. Excuse me. And that's largely because many people who are eligible for the EITC, but who don't claim it, have very low incomes. In fact, about 2/3 of eligible folks who aren't claiming it have such low income that they're not required to file a tax return. So it's a much bigger structural barrier in terms of actually getting those people their EITC refund. Instead, when researchers and other jurisdictions have decreased those barriers to getting the EITC by, say, helping those people get free tax preparation services, or in fact, going ahead and preparing a tax return or amended tax return for the resident, that we see much more success with those kinds of programs. So that's the approach that this legislation takes. It is modeled off of programs that have been deployed in New York City, in New York State, and in California, where basically their comptroller's office is using information that they already have about these taxpayers, or that comes from the federal tax return or from the IRS, creating a tax return for that resident, or in some cases an amended tax return, sending it to the resident for their review. If it looks accurate, the resident can sign it, send it back, and very easily get their refund. And these programs have helped tens of thousands of residents in these other jurisdictions to receive collectively tens of millions of dollars in EITC refunds that they were already eligible for. Here in Maryland, a similar approach actually was used back in 2009. There was a partnership between the IRS and the Comptroller's Office to do a very similar program for 1 year, where the IRS let the Comptroller's Office know about several thousand Marylanders who were eligible for the ITC, but who weren't receiving it. The Comptroller's Office was able to review those folks and ultimately help them get their refund checks. So I'm very optimistic about this potential pathway, this solution that's outlined in this bill in terms of addressing a pretty challenging issue in terms of helping these low-income folks to get their earned income tax credit refunds. Let me last just thank the comptroller staff, and I hear that we do have a couple folks on today to answer technical questions, which is good. I really do appreciate their technical insights on the bill. I will note that we are still working out a few details in terms of the legislation. I do anticipate having a sponsor amendment once we've worked out those final details, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Next, for 2 minutes, Calli Shumans, please.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Calli Shumans. I'm with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization, and we believe all Marylanders should be able to achieve their full potential in a healthy economy that offers a widely shared and rising standard of living. I'm here in support of House Bill 252. I think you'll hear from some of the other speakers about how the EITC is a really powerful tool for increasing economic security for families. I'm going to focus my time on how that is also good for the state's economy. It's because people who are living paycheck to paycheck are much more likely to quickly spend money that they receive through a tax refund because they likely have a list of needs that they've been putting off because they can't afford them. That means the money invested in the EITC ultimately supports our local businesses. Every dollar invested in the EITC generates an estimated $1.24 in economic activity. And as we've seen very clearly in the past year, making sure that more families can afford the basics is also good for state revenues. So with the 20 to 25% of eligible people in Maryland who are not claiming the EITC in a given year represents hundreds of millions of dollars in federal and state tax credits that could be going to Maryland families if people filed their tax returns. So we believe that the program outlined in House Bill 252 could have a really significant impact in terms of better outcomes for thousands of families, as well as to increase economic activity. Therefore, I would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 252. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Lisa Klunemeyer for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lisa Klunemeyer. I'm the Assistant Director of Advocacy at Catholic Charities of Baltimore, here today representing Welfare Advocates, a coalition working to create an adequate safety net program, as well as advance policies that help families build economic security. We're here today in strong support of House Bill 252 because we know the Earned Income Tax Credit is one of our best anti-poverty initiatives, and we want to make sure we're doing everything as a state to enroll eligible Maryland households into this program. I agree with what my colleague said before about this being good for the state. There's also lots of research that shows for low-income families, there's something that's called a cognitive burden that just exists from the day-to-day effort it takes to survive and to ration out income and time and resources. And so for these families, they're already living through the mental tax of living below the poverty line while working. By definition, these are working families. And so any burdens that we can remove as a state to help these families who are dealing with that day-to-day burden, we think is excellent public policy. So we agree that advertisement's not enough with the Earned Income Tax Credit. If we as a state can send out those returns that are already filled out, removing one burden from these low-income families who are just trying to make it to the next day, we think this will help more families get into the EITC program, help our economy, and help our state overall. So we strongly urge a favorable report on House Bill 252, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Julia Gross for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Julia Gross. I'm here representing Marylanders Against Poverty, which is a coalition of service providers, faith communities, and advocacy organizations working to advance statewide public policy and programs necessary to alleviate the burdens faced by Marylanders living in or near poverty and to address the underlying systemic causes of poverty. I'm here today to show our support for HB 252, which aims to help more taxpayers receive earned income tax credits that they're eligible for. Not only does the IATC increase economic stability for low-income Marylanders, but research has shown that it's linked to a range of long-term benefits such as higher incomes or higher earnings, better health outcomes, and even greater success in schools. We know the pandemic has exacerbated the struggles of low-income individuals and families and increased the need for all kinds of safety net programs across our state. But what makes the EITC such an effective and powerful anti-poverty tool across the country is that the money is flexible and can be used to cover any basic needs that other programs often don't cover. So within my primary organization, Maryland Hunger Solutions, we work to address food insecurity across the state. However, more often than not, the populations we serve aren't just struggling to keep food on the table. They're also struggling with things like making rent, keeping their lights on, paying for simple household items like toilet paper and cleaning supplies, and diapers that the nutrition assistance programs that we help connect them to can't be used for. So when individuals and families are in these kinds of dire circumstances, every single safety net program that they can access is a lifeline, and receiving the flexible support from the EITC can be truly life-changing. And so for this reason, Marylanders Against Poverty is fully in support of the program outlined in HB 252 and respectfully urges a favorable report on this bill from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we have Robin McKinney, please, for 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Robin McKinney. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Cash Campaign of Maryland. Cash promotes economic advancement for low to moderate income individuals and families in Baltimore and across Maryland. More than half of our tax filers earn less than $20,000, with many earning less than $10,000. We are here in full support of HB 252. I want to talk about a little bit about demand. We know the earned income tax credit works, and thanks to this committee and your leadership around these issues, we have the most generous one in the country. We need to make sure that not just that everyone gets it, but that everyone's able to maximize it. Our organization at Cash provides free tax preparation to over 25,000 households in a non-pandemic year. Things are a little different these days, but in a non-pandemic year. And we are struggling under the demand. Last year in Baltimore City alone, we got 60,000 phone calls to fill 5,000 appointments. We can't do this by ourselves. Even the paid tax preparation industry, which serves about over 60% of folks, of course, for a fee, they can't do it alone too. We need systemic solutions like this one to help every single person who's eligible. The great thing about the earned income tax credit is that there are lots of new people coming in each year as their eligibility changes, but that means that we're constantly trying to get to people who may not have filed before, that don't even realize that they're eligible. And programs like this will help us to get to those people. We know that people are using this to put food on the table, to pay for bills. We know that it works. Let's make sure to maximize it. In addition to the demand, I also wanted to highlight that the paid tax preparation industry makes a lot of money off of earned income tax credit filers, to the tune of at least $60 million in Maryland alone last year filing these folks' taxes. And they're not closing the gap either on this 20 to 25% each year that aren't claiming it. So we need innovative solutions like this to make a difference. We urge a favorable report on House Bill 252.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor or the panel? I see Delegate Lucky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Blackvich, love the bill. Here's my question. So this only applies then for the state return, right?
Correct.
So would it be possible if we identify somebody as being eligible for the ITC, but not having filed for it, and identify them through this program, wouldn't it also make sense for us to notify them that they might also be eligible for the federal EITC and they should go ahead and apply for that as well?
Yes, I completely agree with that.
Cool. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you all. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 252. Moving on to House Bill 316, Delegate Novotny, and you are the only witness, so when you are ready, please begin.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Atterbury and members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Delegate Novotny, representing Howard and Carroll counties. I was approached a year ago by a constituent who had been caught in a bureaucratic runaround between the state and county, and they asked me to help solve their problem. Since then, I've learned a lot about animal control officers, which I will share with the committee today. Animal control officers have similar responsibilities as other first responders, but under the current law are not eligible for the same tax benefits. For example, in Howard County, the animal control officers and the field supervisors are designated by the county as essential personnel. They conduct thorough investigations involving criminal animal abuse, animal bites, and all associated animal complaints. They write their own search and seizure warrants. They write police reports and charging documents. They testify in district, circuit courts, and before the grand jury. They provide 24/7 coverage to handle emergency calls, assist police, fire, and sheriffs at crime scenes, accidents, emergency petitions, evictions, and the like. In Howard County, they are a civilian investigative branch of our police department with the responsibility of investigating and enforcing the criminal animal laws of Maryland and Howard County Code. They are a division of Howard County Police Department. Our neighbors to the south, the Commonwealth of Virginia, is also introducing a bill to add animal control officers to the First Responders Retirement Benefits Program. Bottom line, animal control officers are not dog catchers anymore. They are investigators that work under the same conditions as other first responders with many of the same duties and responsibilities. Additionally, if you had the opportunity to preview the fiscal note from DLS, the total of this is $18,000 per year. There is an estimated 130 animal control officers in the state, and the retirement credit is estimated to be used by only 22 people per year, bridging a gap from the age of 55 to 64. I want to thank you for your time and ask for a favorable report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any questions for Delegate Novotny? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 316. Moving on to House Bill 256, Delegate Forbes, and she has a panel. So Delegate Forbes, whenever you're ready.
Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, members of the esteemed Ways and Means Committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to present HB 256, a bill that seeks to finally fully fund an existing account that provides nonprofits with interest-free microbridge loans. Credit for the existence of this account goes to my Senate sponsor on this year's bill, Senator Kagan. 5 years ago, the General Assembly saw her vision and passed SB 465 and created an account within the Department of Commerce that would be available to our small nonprofits. These nonprofits are largely dependent on grant funding. NIMBLE, as the account is called, is an acronym for Nonprofit Interest-Free Microbridge Loans. And the NIMBLE Fund provides nonprofits access to small bridge loans while they're awaiting grants they've been approved for to arrive. So if a nonprofit has been approved for a federal, state, county, or municipal grant, but that funding has not yet been released, the nonprofit can go to the Department of Commerce and in about 2 weeks, get a short-term bridge loan of $25,000 or less with no interest. This loan allows them to bridge the time until the promised and approved grant funding arrives. When the grant funding arrives from the nonprofit then repays the loan to the Department of Commerce, and the funds are available to loan out to another nonprofit. So this fund replenishes itself. As introduced 5 years ago, the NIMBLE Fund required a one-time allocation of $1 million. And that funding has never been realized. In the fall of 2017, the account was launched with $187,000 from the state budget. And last session, the budget fenced off $150,000 more, but that funding has not yet reached the NIMBLE account. Even when that's deposited, the NIMBLE account will remain $662,500 underfunded, making this good idea an ineffective tool for nonprofits. The need will outweigh the money that's available. The Department of Commerce has a proposed marketing plan to explain the Nimble Fund to nonprofits, but it's never been executed because the Nimble Fund does not have enough money to fulfill its promise. With the funding that exists and no marketing plan, Nimble has successfully issued 17 loans since its inception, and you'll hear from one of the witnesses on that who's taken advantage of this program. There are more than 32,000 nonprofits in our state, and more than 25,000 of them, the vast majority, report revenues of less than $50,000. I know that each of you could name an awesome, largely volunteer nonprofit in your district that's doing important work that would benefit from the Nimble loans. Our constituents depend on these important groups for so many things, and truthfully, our government depends on them to provide services and fill in the gaps. Once funded, the Nimble Fund will be an invaluable resource for these nonprofits. The passage of HB 265 will mandate that the Nimble Fund reach the one-time allocation of $1 million, so it can be a viable resource for our nonprofits. I thank you for your time, and I ask for a favorable report on HB 265.
Thank you. Next, Nancy Easterling for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to testify. My name is Nancy Easterling, and I am the Executive Director of a National Historic Landmark, Historic Sauterley down in Southern Maryland. Small nonprofits like mine are businesses, but we're small businesses that have a huge mission, and grants are sometimes the only way we can get important projects done. But I'll be honest, I've turned down the possibility of going for a grant because they're almost all on a reimbursement basis. We're not county, state, or federal, and we don't have an endowment or usually reserve to fall back on. When I heard about this microbridge loan, I was in the middle of a grant and was getting stalled. I couldn't move forward because I just didn't have operational funds to make it happen. And if I pulled on my line of credit, I was going to be incurring debt that I was interest that I was not going to get reimbursed for. It was a godsend to get this grant when I had a bond bill. And then I reapplied again when I had an African American Heritage Preservation Program grant. I want you to know that this money goes back into the community. I'm able to move forward with the projects. We're able to do incredible work. And these projects were both with the state of Maryland. You were able to make it happen, help us through a difficult period. And it will be a lifesaver for so many small nonprofits who don't have options like this otherwise. I really hope you can fund this. It made a difference for me, and it could make a difference for hundreds of nonprofits in our state. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, Delegate, Henry Bogdan, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Henry Bogdan. I'm the Policy Director at Maryland Nonprofits. We're the statewide association of over 1,300 nonprofit organizations in every county in the state. We're involved in the creation of the program. House Bill 256 essentially does two things. It takes out language that the Department of Budget and Management, after the passage of the bill originally, determined made it completely discretionary in terms of the funding, which is why the program has existed with only the initial $187,500. The fiscal note on the original bill did anticipate that this would direct up to $1 million over 2 years. Then there was a 3-year delay because of the BRFA. And in fiscal 21, it was supposed to receive the balance of $1 million, but that has not happened. The second thing this bill does is make a mandatory general fund distribution to the program in fiscal 24. What this means is the program in statute has a $1 million cap. When the fund exceeds $1 million, the excess has to go back to the small minority women-owned business account. So the general fund mandatory appropriation in 24 will completely refund any money that's come out of the small minority women-owned business account. I point that out because the question has been raised, aren't we taking money away from that fund? That fund is receiving close to $20 million each year compared to a one-time distribution to the Nimble program. But the general fund appropriation, is pointed out in the fiscal note, will displace and repay those funds to the small minority women-owned business account. Going forward, the fund is a revolving fund. It's operated for 5 years with $187,000, very limited. The problem with that amount is you can't promote a program. When
Mr.
organization,
Bogdan, I'm going to have
Yes,
to
ma'am.
ask you to, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your testimony.
This simply allows us to promote this program to the hundreds of organizations with state, local government grants that are either delayed at startup or they're slow pay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Elise Salzberg for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony in favor of increasing the Nimble Fund to $1 million. My name is Elise Salzberg. Since 2000, I have worked as a fundraising consultant to dozens of nonprofit organizations in Maryland and previously testified in favor of Nimble. While I applaud the passage of legislation that created the Nimble program, its current funding level does not reflect the original intention of the bill, which was to make it easy for nonprofits in our state to attain bridge loans while waiting for payouts on government contracts and grant awards. As it stands, the fund has enough money to provide only seven $25,000 loans at any given time. With 32,000 nonprofit organizations in our state, clearly this is not nearly enough. Awardees of government grants and contracts are expected to start delivering services immediately using their own funds, although there often can be a delay of several months before they receive payment. Most nonprofits that I know don't have the capacity to absorb long payment delays, especially during the pandemic, thereby diminishing their ability to help needy Marylanders. It's not surprising that some nonprofits have given up even applying for government grants. Providing readily available bridge loans of up to $25,000 will go a long way towards supporting small and medium-sized Maryland nonprofits that provide vital services to our communities, including healthcare, childcare, and workforce development programs. Increasing the amount available in the Nimble Revolving Loan Fund to $1 million will ensure that this happens. Thank you again for the opportunity to present this testimony.
Thank you. And last, we have Claudia Wilson Randall, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Claudia Wilson Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. Our members are housing and community development organizations across the state, and we represent a wide range of community-based organizations from one-person shops to sophisticated affordable housing developers. You have my written testimony. But our members are on the front line of communities providing services. And this last 2 years for like all of us has been a real significant struggle. Our members continually face delays in payments on grants and contracts from government partners. Most notably in Baltimore City and Prince George's County, some of our members faced delays of more than 18 months on reimbursable grants. This works to make participation in government programs extremely difficult for our service providers. And anything expanding this program, the Nimble program, will help them. It will also help our organizations that do not have lines of credit and younger nonprofits that are often led by minority people in the community, don't have free access to capital. So I urge a favorable report on this bill, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I see there are a couple of questions, Delegate Buckle and then Delegate Lucky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question, I guess, predominantly for the bill sponsor, just so I understand. This is a one-time only raising, at least from the way I'm reading the fiscal note. So it would only increase the SMWOBA transfer to Nimble in 1 year to the $1 million. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
Yes, you're correct. Once the fund reaches $1 million, the loans can be made out, and as they come back, it replenishes it.
Fund.
So it's a revolving fund. So
it's a revolving
yes.
fund. So it would only be a one-time transfer. My only other question, I guess, is my understanding is that Commerce that administers the program, I really like the program, and everybody who's benefited from it, we want to see them keep benefiting from it. But Commerce has indicated that they've increased the appropriation to it to $300,000 for this year, and that based upon activity within the program, they don't know that there really would be the uptake or the demand for this full amount of the money, which I'm sure that's a point of contention. People think there's more money, more people will apply. Some programs that seems to work that we administer. Some programs they just sit there and continue to generate money for whatever reason. I'm very, I don't know what the right word is, protective, I guess, of SMLOBA. I really like that we created a way to take some of the money from gambling and concentrate it into economic development for these particularized disadvantaged uses. Is there any thought that maybe we could find a different way? If it's just a one-time funding formula, it's just, hey, kick $1 million in or 850,000, whatever it is, to make that gap and then create the revolving fund as a more robust entity. Is there any way to think that maybe we could do it without taking the SMLOBA funds, the 5% of SMLOBA in that given year?
So I hope, thank you, Delegate Buckle, for the question, but I hope you heard what Mr. Bogdan said, that SMLOBA will be made whole. Like it will be. It will be.
But we've
and so it's
taken,
just this one,
right.
this one thing. The other thing is the Department of Commerce has never advertised the Nimble. They've never marketed it to nonprofits because they know the line would be too long. And so that is once it's fully funded, they will launch the educational campaign to teach nonprofits that it exists.
Right.
I had one nonprofit tell me that they got the bridge loan and it was so useful to them, but they didn't want to share it with other people because they were afraid next time they went back, there wouldn't be any money.
Sure.
There.
I appreciate that. And I'm a big supporter of the concept of Nimble and the money. I'm hopeful maybe we can find, if it's $1 million in one shot or whatever it winds up being with our budgetary situation, I know eventually SMLOBA gets the money back. We did something, we didn't do it in our committee. It was done through the budget process a few years ago. Members of our committee may remember this. In the BRFA, we all vote for the BRFA, and sometimes you don't understand every little detail of it. They actually stopped funding a portion of the SMLOBA money for a period of time to go pay for something else. And, I'm concerned because those SMLOBA fund administrators tend to rely on the program in their budgeting, where they're giving money to minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, rural development, things of that nature. So if there's any other way in heaven that we can find to, with all the money sloshing about, let's give this money to Nimble for 1 year and make it a full revolving fund, I'd support that. I just a little hesitation about SMLOBA, but I thank you for the concept very much.
I thank you for those words too. And I'm certain that we would take the money from whatever source it would come from.
Delegate Lucky.
Yeah, thank you. And my original question was similar to what Delegate Buckle was suggesting. If we're just capitalizing this fund essentially, and it revolves from there, why maintain any interaction at all with the small minority women-owned business account?
I just believe that's how it was drafted originally and funded originally. And I was not the original. It was 5 years ago that this passed, and I wasn't around then. But I bet that's just historical. But I will check with Senator Kagan and find out the history on that and get back to you. And
the bridge loans that are made to nonprofits under this, are they interest free or is there an interest rate?
They're interest free. They're micro small loans, $25,000 or less. They have to prove that they've already been approved by the grant and have the paperwork. And it really is, the process is very smooth. I mean, they submit the paperwork and within 10 to 14 days, the loan is delivered to them. So with small nonprofits without lines of credit, this is like a lifesaver for them.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 256. Moving on to our last bill of the day, House Bill 339 with Delegate Kerr. And you have about 7 witnesses who after you will have 2 minutes each. So whenever you are ready, Delegate Kerr, you can begin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of Ways and Means Committee. I'm Delegate Ken Kerr. here today to present House Bill 339, Gaming, Sports Wagering Facilities, Locations. I'm proud to be representing District 3B in Frederick County, where Long Shots Off-Track Betting Parlor, the only 100% woman-owned sportsbook, is located. What this bill asks is for Long Shots Class B sports betting license to be granted a wider area of protection from new competition, extending its existing boundary of 1.5 miles to 10 miles. Casinos and racetracks which hold Class A licenses are given a 15-mile radius around their business in which no other sports books can open. This has allowed the Class A licensees not only to invest in their locations, but to do so without concern about another licensee setting up shop nearby. Frederick County and Long Shots OTB are asking for similar consideration. Frederick's in a unique position as being the largest landmass county in Maryland with a population density of only 413 persons per square mile. By comparison, Baltimore City, where Horseshoe Casino and Sportsbook is located, has a population density of 7,000 people per square mile. Anne Arundel, where Maryland Live is located, has a population density of 1,422 people per square mile. And Prince George's County, where MGM Casino is located, has a population density of 1,882 people per square mile. And all of them have 15-mile exclusivity zones and are much more densely populated than Frederick's 413 people per square mile, and their much smaller exclusivity zone of 1.5 miles. This means that any sports wagering facility in Frederick has to compete for fewer customers and under the current bill in a much smaller area of protection, 10 times smaller than a Class A license. HB 339 will help to ensure that Class B licensees have a better chance at longevity, thereby encouraging upgrading and expanding facilities and hiring more people. Last Friday, the Frederick County delegation unanimously voted to support this bill and make it a delegation bill. There's also an amendment which conforms this bill to the Senate version. Madam Chairman, we request a favorable report on House Bill 339, and I ask now that you call upon Elise Cohen, the owner of the only woman-owned sportsbook in the country.
Okay, Elise Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee for having me. My name is Elise Cohen and I own Long Shots OTB, a satellite simulcast betting facility in Frederick County. As the only 100% woman-owned sportsbook in the United States, I'm here today to discuss the need to help small businesses. Last year's legislation, HB 940, provided 3 of the Class A licensees, casinos, with a 15-mile radius in which no other sportsbook could operate. However, Class B2 licensees, such as Long Shots, were only given 1.5 miles, 1/10 the area of protection. In fact, the parameters for a Class B2 license inherently make those who qualify small businesses. Small businesses do not have large marketing departments, big budgets, or many of the benefits of larger corporations. It's important to underscore that the cost to open a sportsbook for Long Shots is not unlike that of a Class A. Betting kiosks, TVs, speakers, etc. are fixed costs. Furthermore, the MLGCA now requires expensive on-premise accounting and security measures for Class B2 licensees, similar to those to Class A. While I am not contesting the need for accountability measures, I am saying that opening a sportsbook requires considerable investment regardless of its size. It is only fair to Long Shots, a small business, to grant us a larger area of protection as awarded to Class A. Additionally, Long Shots is located in a more remote, less densely populated area. This means that for comparable startup costs, I have to compete for a smaller number of customers. And if other sportsbooks are allowed to enter in close proximity to us, it's likely to not only dilute our customer base, but be financially devastating. Not giving Long Shots an area of protection equal to that afforded to Class A's both discriminates against the small business owner and disincentivizes investment in the Frederick community. In my own instance, I would like to renovate Long Shots' existing space, a dated conference center hotel, into a modern, attractive sportsbook where all Frederick locals could gather. It is only feasible if I'm ensured a greater area of protection.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your testimony, please.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your testimony, please.
Okay, almost done. In conclusion, I'm asking the committee to extend a 10-mile radius around long shots in which no other sportsbook may compete. I strongly believe this will only serve to bolster my small business as well as create investment in the community for many years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bruce Bariano for 2 minutes, please. You're on mute. Bruce, you're on mute. Bruce Bariano, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Thank you. I apologize. Bruce Bariano, I'm here on behalf of Long Shots. We love the Ways and Means Committee. We have a license and we're in business, as Ms. Cohen indicated, because of the efforts of this committee last session. You've heard the testimony. It's very logical. It's an issue that's reflected in the law you passed last year, and we really need that protection. As Ms. Cohen indicated, they're going to put a lot of investment, a lot of money, and really make the state proud in this legislation that this committee and the Senate committee passed last year. We are grateful, very grateful to Delegate Ken Kerr and the delegation, and particularly Karen Young, who also co-sponsored this with Delegate Kerr in their support and understanding of long shots. We urge a favorable consideration of this bill, and thank you for all of the understanding you've had for our efforts in Frederick County. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Weintraub for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Jason Weintraub here on behalf of Green Mountain OTB. I'd just like to start off by saying, like Mr. Bariano, I too love the Ways and Means Committee. You know, for Green Mountain OTB, they're up in Hampstead in Carroll County, District 5. It's a small town of about 6,500 people. They're looking to get their Class B2 license up and running. And I think when you look at a map of where they're located, mile and a half in every direction is farmland. They would greatly benefit by the 10-mile radius under the bill. I believe Chris Richards is here as well to tell you a little bit more details about his operation, and we'd ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Bob Enton for 2 minutes, please.
I believe Mr. Enton is tied up elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. David Richardson. David Richardson, can you hear me? I see him on here. Okay, I will circle back to him. Tony Jones. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'll go to you, Mr. Richards.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Richards from Green Mountain Station Restaurant up in Hampstead. We opened the Green Mountain OTB in January of 2018, and now with our application for the sports wagering, we plan on going live with a sports book here as soon as we can. And just as Ms. Cohen and then as Jason pointed out, this would be very favorable to us. We've got a sizable investment of both time and money, and to do that without knowing that somebody can't just set up another sports book 5 miles away, that would go a long way. So just wanted to voice my support for the bill and appreciate that somebody else thought it was a good idea as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'll circle back to David Richardson.
I think he was in the Senate. I think the bill in the Senate was at the same time, and I think that's where he is possibly.
Okay. Tony Jones. I see you trying to connect to audio from another device, I think. Okay, well, we'll take questions, and then if Mr. Jones or Mr. Richardson is able to get on, I'll let them get on. Okay, I'll start with the subcommittee chair of gaming, Delegate Patterson.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have a question for the bill sponsor. I note that there are some changes from the original bill proposed. can you clarify that there are amendments and exclusions of other counties and that it's only Frederick County that's being considered now?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman, for the question. We, at this point, we are asking for Frederick County to be the only one considered. We're making a delegation bill, and we thought that that would simplify the process this year.
All right, and for Ms. Cohen, in terms of expenses, and I can assure you, I recognize it and acknowledge expense, but is there a procedure for reimbursement from the Department of Commerce for expenditures for the expansion of your facility?
Not that I'm aware. There may be for minorities as, you know, people of color and women coming up, but not that I'm specifically aware.
Excuse me, let's check into that because you're saying, but aren't you the female or woman owner?
I am, but I'm just saying I'm not specifically aware of what that may be at this moment, so forgive me.
Thank you.
Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Delegate Kerr, I appreciate what you just said. So what you're saying is you're going to offer an amendment that it will only apply to the Long Shots facility, and all the other folks who just testified from Greenmount Station wouldn't no longer be in the bill. They would no longer be benefited. The folks on the riverboat on the Potomac that I have a letter in my file that said that they were interested in the same exception from Charles County, they wouldn't be affected. Is that correct? So it's basically just a single shot bill is the way you want to present it now?
That's the way we have it presented, Delegate Buckle.
Okay.
If the committee wants to amend in those other locations, we would.
Well, I mean, the way it's drafted, at least the way I'm reading it, it already includes those counties. It lists Calvert, Carroll, Charles, Washington, and Frederick. It does not list Anne Arundel, which has Bingo World, which also gets an automatically named B2. I don't know what the difference is for them, unless maybe they're already within 10 miles, but they can't be within 10 miles of Maryland Live because they would already have been excluded by Maryland Live's radius of influence. So I'm just wondering and then the other question I had was, so your facility, not your facility, but Ms. Cohen's facility in Frederick County is one of the specifically named B2 licensees. But the bill also allows for up to 30 additional B1 or B2 licensees to be awarded in a competitive process under the SWARC or whatever acronym they've come up with it for. Would your bill say that if a new business, say a restaurant, I don't know, a Green Turtle sports bar restaurant in Frederick City, if they got a Class B2 license, would they automatically have a 10-mile wraparound exclusion from them? Or would they not be able to apply because they're within your 10-mile wraparound? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering if you say it applies to all of Frederick County, there may be other people in other parts of Frederick County who ultimately apply for a Class B2 competitive, and would they automatically be included under the bill? Mr. Bariano can answer if he wants. I saw him raising his hand.
Can I ask Mr. Bariano to address the amendment?
I'm just trying to be helpful. It would just be a 10-mile radius from the licensee of where Long Shots is located. It would not include all of Frederick County. It would be no different than you have the radiuses that were created in the original legislation. It would be the location of the licensee and the 10-mile with the Class A, it's a 15-mile radius, and that would be it. And coincidentally was the hearing and the Budget and Taxation Committee, Madam Chair, if I may say, both the sponsor of the bill there made clear that if other counties would like to come on to the bill, the sponsor did not have any problem. There was an honest mistake when the bill was presented that Washington County, that was included in the original bill introduced, did not have a desire to participate in the bill. So the amendment was to take them out, but there's some valid reasons if other jurisdictions want to come in based upon licensees that need protection in their counties. Thank you very
And
much.
so am I reading this correctly, Mr. Brianna? So the distinction is, for my question really is, I look more at the wording of the bill as opposed to the fiscal note, is that you have a Class B2 as an OTB. And so that the 10-mile restriction would not apply to all Class B2 holders, but only Class B2 holders that otherwise have an off-track license under a separate code statute. Is that correct?
That is the basis upon which the license was obtained. And I think that's a very fair reading of it.
Okay.
But we're not, Delegate Sir, we're not trying to exclude other valid cases and arguments for future licensees. The whole point of the matter, and I believe this committee understands it, is that by the grace of this committee, these locations require a great deal of investment and capital and work, and that should be honored and respected from a distance standpoint, regardless of how you got that license. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to check before we move on to questions. Tony Jones, have you connected with us yet?
Madam Chair, I sent him a message. He's having trouble with his audio.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Delegate Lucky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Weintraub, Mr. Bariana, either one of you can answer this. I just want to walk through this. So under the bill we passed, there are two tiers of exclusion zones, right? There's a 1.5 mile exclusion zone around the three casinos in more heavily populated jurisdictions, right? MGM and Maryland Live. We kept that 1.5 mile exclusion zone, right?
That's correct.
Correct.
So then the three named Class A licensees in the more rural parts of the state in Rocky Gap and Cecil County and Worcester County, they all have this 15-mile radius under current law, right?
Correct.
So the argument is that and I think it's a fair argument, that we neglected to consider rural licensees who received a Class B license and who should, if the argument is that an exclusion zone helps to maintain the economic viability of a project in a more rural part of the state, that there should be a similar conversation about an exclusion zone around those rural licensees. In this bill, whether it's Frederick County or more, that's 10 miles, right?
Correct.
So in the version of the bill that is on the General Assembly website, it names 5 counties: Calvert, Carroll, Charles, Frederick, and Washington County. And I assume those are the rural jurisdictions that have Class B and Class B1 and B2 named licenses, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, very candidly, I'd say this respectfully, very candidly, when the request for the bill was done, and I was working with Delegate Kerr's office and Senator Young's office, it was only to include Frederick County.
Okay.
The bill came back and went in. I don't know how these other counties got in there. Not against it, not opposed. I mean, these things happen, and that's fine. I think the question for the committee then, I think the larger policy question is, if we acknowledge that because of population density, the rural casinos have a different market they're operating in than the casinos in more populated parts of the state, the same conversation then would need to be had about the Class B licensees. But it would seem to me that it would be broader than just a list of counties, right? Can I ask Mr. Bariana, why did Washington County not want to be included? Do you know? Senator Quarterman, I chatted with him. He did not know how sports betting was going to develop in Washington County, and did not want to participate in that limitation, that distance limitation at this time, and he asked to come out of it.
Sure.
I was very apologetic because it was not intended to include Washington County in the first place. And Senator Corderman did speak up at the B&T hearing this afternoon. Coincidentally, both bills are being heard, and just clarified to the chair and the budget committee that he wants Washington County taken out of the bill, which they're going to do, of course. But we're respectfully, we're not trying to exclude anybody. It's I think the case has been made for why the protection is needed. If there are other jurisdictions or other entities that are either in the locations of the members of this committee or the General Assembly that it's applicable and warranted, that is fine. I'm not trying to be. I think the case has been made for long shots, and we're just trying to have a viable experience based upon what you gave us, and we need that protection. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Can I ask, sorry, Madam Chair, one more question of Mr. Weintraub, since he has spent more hours than I think he ever expected to working on issues with gaming. Have there been other unnamed applicants for B1 and B2 licensees who have already applied? If you know, the reason I'm asking is just we're in this weird situation where, you know, what if you have a Class B licensee who's already applied, who's within the radius that we now establish under law? What happens to that application?
Delegate Lucky, thank you for the question. I'm not aware of any pending applications of other unnamed B1 or B2 licenses that are before lottery in any capacity. I think they are just going after the named 17 applications at this time.
Okay, so arguably, the only time we would be able to adjust these perimeters would be now, before those unnamed license applications start flowing in, right? Because
that's exactly right. I mean, there's sort of I don't want to say use the term hold harmless, but there is no impact on applicants that have not yet applied.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Weintraub, Mr. Bariano. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Delegate Rose and Delegate Ebersol and Barnes. Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to piggyback on some of my other colleagues' comments, I think Chris Richards is still here. This affects my district in Hampstead. My understanding and reading of the bill is such that we've all sort of come to the conclusion. And while it certainly would benefit long shots, it would also benefit other entities that have gone through this process in good faith, the way that we passed this bill last year at considerable cost out of their pocket under the guidelines that we laid out. And I feel that just going through this process and coming up with this issue to exclude other counties, I just personally don't agree with. I don't know if Mr. Richards is still on, since he's a local business owner. I believe there was quite a bit of personal investment that has gone into moving forward to bring this to fruition during a time when the restaurant industry and certainly this location has greatly struggled. So I see that you're back on. So Mr. Richards, if you would speak to that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Sure. You're correct. The last 2 years with the pandemic have been the hardest too in my 27 years of doing this. So we were hoping with the investment of the sports book that would help us get back on track, and that didn't come cheap. I mean, even though it's the lowest of the license fees, it's still $52,000 plus all the background checks, plus all the other things that go into, getting all the application process done. And there's also going to be a considerable outlay of capital expenses. I know I heard Ms. Cohen talk about the kiosk and other infrastructure and technology that's going to have to be purchased, and it's not an inexpensive endeavor. So any protection that we could get would be gladly appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Just to follow up, Madam Chair. And Mr. Richards, just based on the location of the rural aspect of Hampstead, where your location is, this would provide a good protection for making sure this is a viable investment for the community based on your proximity to, let's say, Westminster or other more populated areas?
Correct. I mean, like Jason said, if you go a mile and a half, you're literally, for us, you're talking about farmland. Westminster is about 8 miles away. So yeah, that would provide protection from somebody over there opening up a sports book that would directly compete with us. And therefore, the way we look at it, jeopardize our investment with our sports book that we're opening.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of questions, if that's okay with you. First, I understand that Washington County shouldn't have been there in the first place, and you spoke to Mr. Quarterman. Has anybody talked to the Jockey Bar and Grill? Are they not interested in this kind of protection? I can take an answer from anybody on this because they're not here. They're not represented here.
Yeah, as the bill went to bill drafting, it was only supposed to be Frederick County. It came out of bill drafting with the other counties added. So we never meant to exclude anyone. We just didn't mean to include them. We were just looking at long shots in Frederick County for this bill. But we're not opposed to adding these other locations to the bill to have similar consideration and protection.
So procedural question, does anybody know, if other B2s are purchased, will they enjoy the same protection? Or if they're in one of these rural counties, let's say we pass it with these counties in there as they open, or is it just for these 4 OTBs and the bingo parlors as well? Because they're the other ones in the other counties. Does anybody know? Are we just singling out these 6 facilities here?
I can take a shot, Madam Chair, answering that if that's okay.
I'm not Madam Chair, but thank you so much.
Delegate Ebersol, to be clear, as drafted, as introduced, this would only apply to the OTBs.
The OTBs, B2s, nobody else.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Okay, Delegate Barnes, I see you lowered your hand. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 339. Thank you. And
Thank you.
that concludes the hearings for the Ways and Means Committee today. Committee, I will see you all tomorrow. We have a briefing at 11 a.m. and then bill hearings resume again at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Madam Chair, local revenues is meeting at 3 p.m. today. So make sure you click on it. Thanks.